Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are going to be talking about networking protocols in these videos. This is the intermediate installation of our networking training. You may have just finished watching James go through our fundamentals networking training. Well, we are about to get a lot deeper into networking protocols. We will not go as deep as possible, though. I can't make you a networking guru just by watching these videos for the next hour. I can give you the information you need to have a knowledgeable conversation with the IT departments when something is going wrong with your system on the network. But if you really want to get super deep, I mean, you can always go to the help file for these deeper topics inside Q-SYS, or you may need to do your own independent training and deep research into networking protocols. We're going to talk about the networking requirements that you need for your Q-SYS system to properly transmit audio, video, and control data across your local area network. And we're going to talk about why we actually need those requirements so that you have a little bit understanding, not just, oh, flip this switch, but more importantly, why do I need to flip that switch? Because that switch may be located somewhere else based on whatever switches you're using, for instance. So we are going to spend a lot of time together. This is going to be about an hour long, and there's a lot of information in this. If you've seen our Q-SYS Level 1 videos, you're probably thinking to yourself, oh, great. That Nate guy is going to throw a bunch of dinosaur jokes at me. He's going to just spend this whole time making jokes and not really talking about networking. Well, I have good news for you. The good news is that in Level 1, we did that because we need you to pay attention. But here, if you're watching these videos, it's probably because your job's already on the line, or you're in the middle of an installation that's not working, and your switches aren't transmitting, and there's something wrong with the network, and you're like, I need a solution, I need answers. So you've already got incentive enough to pay attention. I don't need to throw dinosaur jokes at you the whole time. You're already with me. So the moral of the story here is that networking is very serious, much like this T-Rex. So we're going to start off by talking about QLAN protocols, the various networking protocols that we need to have properly installed and working on our switches, and why we use them. In the previous videos, James described QLAN as such. QLAN is the audio, video, and synchronization protocols we need for Q-SYS to work on the network, and that is accurate. But let's get a little bit deeper. What are the protocols that we use for audio and for video and for clock synchronization and for control? And how do you enable them and manage them properly on your switches? So let's open up this box and look at what QLAN actually is. Here are a variety of protocols that we need to make sure are properly managed. We use UDP for things like control and audio. We use TCP for control. We use QDP. Now that may be one that is a little bit new to you. This one is Q-SYS Discovery Protocol. That is a proprietary protocol, but it's not something that we're making up out of the ether. This is a IANA registered protocol. Your IT professionals can look it up and they will see that it is an official networking protocol. That's the way that our devices can identify and communicate with each other across the network. We use RTP for video, HTTPS for control, PTP v2 for clock synchronization. A lot of these protocols should be familiar to an IT professional, but maybe not you. So we'll talk about why we use them, what they do, and things like that. And it's important to note that QLAN is not a new protocol in itself. QLAN is actually more like a marketing term that we use to bundle all these protocols together. So QLAN is just this suite of standards-based authorized official protocols that the real world uses that we need to make sure are operating properly inside Q-SYS. So let's look at some of these. We'll start off with UDP and TCP. These are some really common protocols that are true for lots and lots of devices out there in the real world. UDP and TCP are different ways that a sending device can transmit information to a receiving device. One-way communication for UDP. UDP is called User Datagram Protocol. And if I have a controlling device that wants to send information, in this case, maybe to a network camera, it says, hey, I want you to pan up. And we send that command across the network, the camera receives it and pans up. It sends each of these commands one by one, and the camera reacts. Now, in this case, sending the control via UDP means that the sending device sends the commands or the packets across the network, and It just kind of hopes that it gets there. It assumes that it's going to get there, and it trusts that it gets there, but it's possible that it won't because we're not waiting for the receiving device to report back its current information. Now, that's probably okay for something like a camera. If you're moving the camera around, you have visual confirmation that the camera is moving. So you have your own feedback of whether or not the control was received. And that's not always true if you don't have something like a camera where you get that hard feedback. So for UDP, this is actually really, really useful for sending audio. That's why we would use it for audio. We can't delay the speed that audio wants to be sent across the network. If you were waiting for the receiving device to say, yes, I got your message, send me the next one, then the audio would actually end up getting a little delayed and getting a little hiccupy, right? We don't want to hear that network jitter as we are waiting for audio packets to be delivered. So we send audio via UDP, which means that we send the packet, we just send the packet, we just send the packet. In fact, I've got a UDP joke for you, but you might not get it. Thank you very much. I know, I told you that I would do this whole training without being funny, and the good news is I've kept that promise. So, the other side of this is TCP. TCP is Transmission Control Protocol. TCP will take its information, send it to the receiving device, and then the receiving device says, hey, I received your data. What do you want me to do with it? You got more data? This is the first of 3? Then I'll wait for you to send more my way. Hey, I got packet 1 of 3. I'm ready for packet 2 of 3. Send me packet 2 of 3. And then 2 of 3 comes in and says, hey, I got number 2 of 3. I'm ready for 3 of 3, and waits for the next one. We have this real nice handshaking going back and forth between the sender and the receiver that makes sure every single packet was delivered. If it wasn't, then the sending device says, hey, I didn't get a confirmation delivery on that last one. Let me send it again. And in this way, we make sure the control always gets to the receiving device no matter what, at the possible expense of it taking a little bit longer. Not long enough that you and I are going to notice. It's not the kind of thing where a human presses the play button and then it takes 5 seconds for it to actually play. It's the kind of length that a computer will notice. We're in the microsecond world. But it is important to note that that does delay the packet delivery, and it also bloats the traffic just a little bit, because now every single sending packet also has a header of which packet sequence it has. And then we have a recipient bit added to it when it comes back. You got all these little extra bits of information, this metadata about the packet that's being shared back and forth between the sending and receiving device, which makes that traffic grow just a little bit. So using TCP for control makes sense, but you can see why we would not use it for audio. Like I said, that would delay the audio. Now, there's other types of traffic on a system. You may think to yourself, hey, we're going to talk a lot about multicast in this training. Think to yourself, if you had to send something via multicast, would it be using UDP or TCP? Which of those makes the most sense? We'll talk about multicast in just a little bit. Essentially, multicast is you sending packets to multiple recipients. Which of these methods would you use? We actually don't use TCP because that would require us to wait for every single one of those receiving devices to confirm that they got it. That wouldn't be very efficient. So if we're talking multicast, it's almost always exclusively going to be UDP. Let's dig a little deeper on what multicast is. I've said it a couple times now, just in case you're not very familiar. There's various ways that you can transmit your packets across a network. The most common is probably something like unicast. Unicast means that there's a one-to-one association between the sending device and the receiving device. So the transmitting device says, hey, I want to talk to this device specifically. Here's my packet. Let's send it to that person, 1-to-1. Piece of cake. Then there is something called broadcast. Broadcast does not get used very frequently in Q-SYS, but you may be familiar with it in concept. Essentially, broadcast is one-to-all, where the sending device wants everyone on the network to receive its data. So the sending device sends it once, and then the network manages delivering that to every single possible recipient. Generally speaking, we don't do broadcast in Q-SYS because most of our devices would not want all of that data. What we use in Q-SYS is multicast. Multicast is one-to-many communication, where the sending device says, I do need this to go to multiple places, but we're going to be really selective about which devices actually sign up or subscribe for that multicast traffic. And then the networks and the switches are responsible for making sure that only the proper devices get that data. Okay, so how does that work just at a functional level? Here we've got a sending device, which is a core. It's got to pass through the switch to get to various receiving devices. If the sending device wants to send information via unicast, then it needs to know the IP address of its recipient. Same way that you need to know the address of the person that you are mailing something to if you are mailing something with that, the Postal Service, which was a thing years ago, which I think still exists. Anyways, this sending device says, hey, I want to say hello to 10.0.0.10. That's that device down there. And when that information shows up in the switch looks in its address resolution protocol table, which is the ARP table. Essentially, that's a table that it builds whenever a device connects to it. It says, hey, I'm a device, I'm connecting to my switch, and the switch says, I know who you are, I see your IP address, I'm going to write down that you're on port 2 in this case, and I'll remember that for later. So now when it gets a message coming in for 10.0.0.10, the switch says, I totally remember that guy. He's located on port 2. I know where he lives. Let me deliver the mail for you. And then the switch is responsible for delivering that to the receiving device. So if that sending device wants to say hello to all 3 of these, that means it's going to send 3 unicast transmissions. 1 to the first one, 1 to the second one, 1 to the third one. Each time, the switch will receive that information, say, yeah, I remember .11, he's on port 3, I'll send that way. The next time we get a hello world, it says, 10.0.0.12, port 10. Yes, absolutely, that's located right over here, and delivers it over there. This is fine for small things like saying hello or discovery protocols. It wouldn't work for larger packets, very large packets, something like video packets. If that receiving device was sending a video stream that's 800 megabits per second, we can't send that 3 times to get to 3 different devices, because that's more than a gigabit would allow for the connection between the core and that first switch. So for things like large packets or anything that's going to be multicast, it's got to be delivered to the multicast address instead of the switch. We don't say which of the devices we're sending it to. In this case, we're sending it to 239.0.0.1. That is a reserved multicast address on the switch. And the switch says, I see what you're doing. You're trying to send me multicast data. I gotcha. Let me go look in all my ports and figure out which of these devices signed up for multicast, and then I will deliver it to the appropriate destinations. That way you have the data being sent once from the sending device, but then the switch manages where it's going to each of the receiving devices. And that's one of the ways that we make sure that we're not flooding the traffic with too much large packets, especially in video. And once again, you can see then why multicast would be UDP, right? Because all of those devices cannot wait for the receiving device to come back again. Whereas TCP is used in that one-to-one connection because that makes sense. Oh, by the way, I also have a TCP joke for you. You get it? You get it? You get it? You get it? I'm not gonna, all right. Anyways, let's wrap that up here. We've learned about TCP and UDP and transmission types. In the next section, we are going to dig into some more of the Q-SYS protocols. See you in a bit.